Orion Gardner, 14th ranked executive of the Scaled Dragon Society, explodes with rage. His face contorted, veins bulging, he roars, "Damn it all! This isn't going as planned." Across the treacherous, snow-covered chasm, Theo clashes with his opponent. Orion watches, his initial skepticism replaced by a gnawing unease. Theo is far more powerful than he anticipated. He wonders just how strong is he? This changes everything. A bead of cold sweat traces a path down Orion's temple. His jaw clenches. This situation is far more complicated than he'd predicted. Axion, arrogant and overconfident, is actually losing. The thought sparks a dangerous idea in Orion's mind. Should he betray Axion and throw his support behind Theo? After all, Axion's always been a cocky son of a bitch. Maybe a little humbling is in order. Orion's face is shadowed, his expression unreadable. The wheels are turning. He's caught in a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, weighing the risks and rewards of betrayal. The silence hangs heavy in the frosty air. A flicker of resolve sparks in Orion's eyes. He's made his decision. "It's too late to switch sides now," he mutters to himself. "The Bureau's proctors are already here. They'll deal with Theo. Our priority is creating a diversion." Orion raises his voice, cutting through the tense silence. "Scaled Dragon Society, disperse, now!" The command echoes through the snow-laden trees. Like shadows in the blizzard, Orion's men melt into the dense forest. "We need to get clear of this area," one hisses urgently. "This fight is beyond us. Axion's on his own." The whispers fade as they disappear into the swirling snow. The scene shifts abruptly. We're thrown into a flashback. A young Axion, his eyes still holding a childlike innocence, stands in a grand, opulent room, clutching a small, ornate knife. A voice, heavy with authority, echoes through the chamber, calling his name. Emil, in a flowing dark gown, stands beside Ed Troyvon, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and determination. They look down at the young Axion. "The fate of Ragnar rests on your shoulders," Ed declares, his voice resonating with the weight of responsibility. "You must claim the throne." Ed steps forward, his expression a chilling blend of wisdom and ruthlessness. "The Ragnar name," he rasps, "is nothing but a facade, a carefully constructed illusion." His words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Axion's piercing red eyes lock onto Ed's, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You are a Troyvon," he states, each word a hammer blow. "Never forget your true bloodline. This is your birthright." We snap back to the present. Axion stands poised for battle, the image of controlled fury. Observing from his hidden vantage point, Orion feels a grudging respect. "He's become quite the warrior," he admits, a hint of apprehension creeping into his voice. With a burst of speed, Theo closes the distance, launching himself across the chasm. He lands with a resounding thud, his sword already arcing towards Axion. The duel ignites. "Theo Ragnar!" Axion roars, meeting Theo's attack head-on. The clash of their swords reverberates through the frozen air, a sharp, metallic clang that underscores the deadly nature of their encounter. Axion unleashes a furious assault, his sword blazing with an ominous red aura. Each strike is infused with raw power and aggression, a whirlwind of steel and fury. A shower of sparks erupts as their blades meet again and again, the force of the impacts shaking the very ground beneath their feet. The air crackles with tension. Their eyes lock, Axion and Theo caught in a deadly dance. The expressions on their faces are mirrored reflections of grim determination, each vying for dominance. Hidden amongst the snow-laden branches, everything is proceeding according to plan. Theo thinks, his voice laced with a chilling satisfaction. Within the confines of a shadowy chamber, figures gather around a large circular table. One stands, delivering his report. Theo Ragnar has finally made his appearance. He's currently engaged in combat with Axion Ragnar. The news ripples through the assembled figures, sparking murmurs of anticipation. Julius laughs erupting from his throat. "About time!" he exclaims. "Theo's finally making his move." His excitement is palpable. Wolfgang frowns in confusion. "He wasn't eliminated? I thought our men took care of him." His voice is laced with uncertainty. Ed, a subtle sigh of relief escaping his lips. "He lives, excellent. Now the final phase can commence." His voice is smooth and calculating. A sinister smirk spreads across the Ed's face. "Once Axion has served his purpose and extracted the information we require," he purrs, his voice laced with menace, "my hand-picked swordsman will be waiting to cut him down, like a ripe fruit falling from a tree." Two guards, clad in ornate golden armor, approach the table, their expressions solemn. Lord Troyvon, one announces, bowing his head respectfully, we have received new intel. The guard informed Ed that Axion and Theo are now in the midst of a duel. What in the? He mutters under his breath. Theo's movements blur, a dizzying display of speed and skill. His jester's footwork technique unleashes a storm of attacks, each strike aimed with deadly precision. Axion struggles to defend himself, barely parrying the onslaught. Theo's sword becomes a flashing arc of light, a whirlwind of deadly intent. The air sings with the whoosh of his blade, each pass a hair's breadth from finding its mark. The attack is relentless, a constant barrage of blows that leaves Axion breathless. He's fighting for his life, desperately trying to keep up with Theo's blinding speed. Axion grits his teeth, his muscles screaming in protest. He's forced to acknowledge Theo's remarkable growth, the sheer power behind every strike. He's strong, Axion admits through gritted teeth, his voice laced with a grudging respect. A lot stronger than I thought. Despite the ferocity of Theo's attack, Axion's keen eyes detect a flaw. A sliver of hope flickers in his chest. He's powerful, Axion realizes, but he's not that fast. There's a pattern here. Axion's gaze focuses intently on Theo's sword hand, analyzing every twitch and flick of the wrist. He's deciphering the rhythm of the attack, anticipating Theo's next move. I'm starting to see through your little dance, he thinks, a smirk playing on his lips. With growing confidence, Axion begins to predict Theo's attacks with uncanny accuracy. He parries a blow that would have cleaved him in two, a smug grin spreading across his face. I've got you figured out, he taunts. Every single move. A sudden projectile whizzes past Axion's ear, embedding itself deep in the snow behind him. He stares at the embedded weapon, his eyes widening in disbelief. A throwing technique, he exclaims, his voice laced with surprise. Where did that come from? The Ground 4 training member gasp, their faces pale with shock. The sudden appearance of the thrown sword has rattled them, their confidence shaken. A flashback to Theo past when you dead with a thrown sword. Axion lands lightly on his feet, the snow swirling around him like a shroud. His eyes, cold and sharp as shards of ice, fix on Theo. There's a fundamental flaw in your strategy, he states, his voice dripping with disdain. Axion continues, his words a chilling lesson in combat. Relying on flashy, predetermined sequences only serves to telegraph your next move. You're making it far too easy for me to anticipate your every action. A single drop of blood detaches itself from Axion's blade, falling onto the pristine white snow below. It's a stark reminder of the deadly consequences of their duel, the fragility of life hanging heavy in the air. The snow around the fallen man is rapidly turning crimson, the stark white canvas now marred by the brutal reality of violence. The silence is deafening, broken only by the whistling wind. Theo's eyes narrow, his gaze fixed on the fallen man. He recognizes the uniform, the insignia. A cold realization washes over him, his voice barely a whisper. It was you, all along. Theo remembers the cloaked figure in his last moments before regression. Axion stares at the lifeless form, his mind racing. The dead man's face, now contorted in a silent scream, is etched into his memory. The pieces of the puzzle are starting to fall into place. The cloaked figure pulls his hood further over his face, obscuring his features in shadow. He remains motionless, an ominous presence in the snowy landscape. Axion's eyes blaze with an almost inhuman intensity. His patience is wearing thin. End this, he commands, his voice devoid of emotion, cold and sharp as a winter wind. A wave of fury washes over Theo, his face a mask of rage and grief. He remembers the burning palace, the screams, the overwhelming sense of loss. The monster who did this, he growls, his voice thick with venom. He will have his revenge. The scene shifts once more, plunging us deeper into Theo's memories. The magnificent Rose Palace is engulfed in flames, the once proud structure now a crumbling inferno. The day I died, Theo's voice echoes through the memory, filled with pain and regret. Theo remembers running through the burning halls of the palace, desperation clawing at his throat. I was meant to die that day, he thinks, his voice filled with bitterness, never knowing who was responsible for this atrocity. A single tear rolls down Theo's cheek, a stark contrast to the burning backdrop of his memory. His voice cracks with emotion. All because I was helpless, powerless. The memory fades, leaving a raw ache in his chest. Rendon's carelessness was a stroke of luck, he muses, a cruel smile twisting his lips. He removed his mask at precisely the right moment. A fatal mistake. Theo's voice, now tinged with a newfound determination, cuts through the silence. Thanks to Evelyn's relentless investigation, he recalls, his eyes hardening with resolve, I uncovered the truth. Rendon and the Camellia Palace were deeply intertwined, two sides of the same coin. The burning palace looms large in Theo's mind, a constant reminder of his tragic past. It was the only logical conclusion, he realizes, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. The Camellia Palace was behind the attack. The cloaked figure in the present remains shrouded in mystery, his face still hidden, his motives unknown. His silent presence only adds to the growing tension. Theo's mind races, piecing together the clues. There's one unique detail that can't be ignored, he remembers, his voice gaining a newfound edge. Among all the Troivans, only one individual utilizes the sword-throwing technique. The realization hits Theo like a lightning bolt. The name echoes in his mind, a name synonymous with betrayal and destruction. Axion Ragnar, he whispers, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Theo analyzes his enemy's fighting style, his mind sharp and calculating. Throwing a sword is a reckless gamble, a high-risk maneuver, he thinks. Only someone consumed by arrogance, someone with an inflated sense of their own invincibility, would employ such a tactic. The last vestiges of doubt vanish from Theo's mind. His eyes harden with cold certainty. I wasn't entirely sure at first, he admits, his voice laced with a newfound conviction. But now, having witnessed it firsthand, there's no denying the truth. Theo's bloodied fingers tighten around the shattered remains of his sword. The fractured metal digs into his flesh, but he barely notices the pain. Crack. The sound of the breaking blade echoes the shattering of his past illusions. The sword finally gives way, splitting into two useless pieces. Crack. Both then, Theo whispers, his voice a low growl. Theo's voice rings out across the snowy battlefield, his question a raw expression of anguish and rage. What is it with you people? Why are you so hell-bent on ending my life? Axion stares, momentarily stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief. He just broke a sword with his bare hand, he stammers, his voice a mixture of shock and awe. Theo lets the broken pieces of the sword fall to the ground, his expression hardening with resolve. He looks down at his bloodied hand, then back at Axion. This isn't like before, he declares, his voice firm and unwavering. I won't make the same mistakes again. With a swift, fluid movement, Theo retrieves a discarded sword from the snow-covered ground, the weapon of one of his fallen comrades. He grips the hilt tightly, feeling the cold steel against his skin. A steely glint enters Theo's eyes, his face a mask of determination. I will survive, he vows, his voice echoing with a newfound strength, and I will protect those I fight alongside. With a surge of power, Theo throws the broken sword toward Axion. Axion scoffs, unimpressed by Theo's display of strength. What was that pathetic display, he sneers, his voice laced with contempt. A pale imitation of my technique? You truly are a fool. Axion's eyes narrow, a flicker of recognition sparking in their depths. He's noticed something that sends a shiver down his spine. He flinches, a sudden intake of breath betraying his unease. Wait a minute. Theo's movements become a blur, his speed increasing exponentially. Axion struggles to keep up, his senses overwhelmed by the sudden shift in tempo. What in the world is this speed? He thinks, his mind reeling. A chilling premonition washes over Axion, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He recognizes the aura surrounding Theo, the raw, unbridled power radiating from him. This isn't just killing intent, he realizes, his voice a hushed whisper. This is something far more sinister. Theo's mana surges, a wave of raw energy that explodes outwards, filling the air with a palpable pressure. Axion feels like he's suffocating, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of Theo's power. How can his mana levels be this high? A horrifying realization dawns on Axion, his blood running cold. Could it be, he thinks, his eyes wide with fear? Was he holding back during the first stage? Was this his plan all along? Axion was in a shock, asking, why was Theo hiding his skills until now? Failing to notice Theo's fast attack. Theo unleashes a devastating attack, a wave of pure energy that rips through the forest, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Trees splinter and explode, the ground trembles, and the air itself seems to crackle with raw power. Theo raises his sword high above his head, the blade shimmering with an almost otherworldly light. He brings it down with ferocious speed, aiming straight for Axion's head. With a desperate cry, Axion raises his own sword, barely managing to block Theo's strike. Sparks fly as steel meets steel, the force of the impact sending tremors through his arms. Axion, fueled by adrenaline and rage, pushes back against Theo's onslaught, his own attacks becoming increasingly frantic. He's fighting with everything he has, every ounce of strength and skill he possesses. A cry of pain escapes Theo's lips as one of Axion's desperate strikes connects, a gash appearing on his arm. Blood splatters against the snow, a stark reminder of the brutal reality of their fight. Seeing an opening, Theo presses his advantage, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "So," he taunts, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "is that the extent of your mighty power? I must confess I'm disappointed." Axion's face twists into a mask of pure rage. He snarls, his voice a guttural growl. You will pay for that." Axion grapes Theo's hand. The sudden move catches Theo completely off guard. He stumbles forward, his balance thrown, his eyes widening in surprise. A look of pure shock registers on Theo's face, as he's seeing Axion's sword approaching his head. A sharp cry of pain tears from Theo's throat as Axion capitalizes on his momentary lapse in concentration. Theo jumps, trying to avoid the sword. Axion rolls to his feet just in time to block another of Theo's lightning-fast kicks. He staggers under the force of the blow, his arms trembling with the effort. The duel continues, a brutal back-and-forth exchange of blows. They trade strikes, each attack carrying the weight of their shared history, their intertwined destinies. The snow swirls around them, a chaotic ballet of death and fury. Theo, his eyes blazing with a cold fire, advances on Axion, his sword held in a ready stance. The snow falls around them, a silent witness to their desperate struggle. Axion pauses mid-stride, his head cocking slightly to the side. He's sensed something, a change in the air, a shift in Theo's demeanor. "What's this?" he wonders, his voice a low murmur. Theo approaches Axion again, preparing to strike. Their swords collide once more, the impact creating a vortex of energy that explodes outwards, sending snow and debris flying in all directions. The force of the collision is immense, the air itself seeming to distort and bend around them. Theo's face is a mask of grim determination, his eyes locked onto his target. He utters a single word, a name that drips with venom and hatred: Axion. With a ferocious roar, Theo charges forward, his boots kicking up sprays of snow as he closes the distance between them. He's putting everything he has into this final attack. "Let me give you a taste of your own medicine," Theo growls, his voice laced with a chilling menace. "Do you know what it feels like?" He pauses, letting his words hang in the air. Theo's eyes burn with a cold, hard fury, his face illuminated by the ethereal glow of his blade. "To have a sword plunged through your stomach?" He finishes his question, the chilling promise of violence hanging heavy in the air. Axion's eyes widen in disbelief and pain. Theo's blade has found its mark, approaching Axion's head.